Okay guys, welcome. The last time actually I ran the application, but we couldn't log in. So we have to dive deep into the identity server. We were talking about microservice architecture. We started to build something. We're using one example project, but let's distinguish Microsoft Identity and Identity Server 4. This is totally different project. So what they're using in the example application is not Microsoft Identity. They use Identity Server and the libraries which are coming and NuGet packages which are coming from this project. What is the Identity Server? The Identity Server is security token service. There are a lot of security token services which provide us with the tokens to allow us access to different APIs and applications, resources in common. So for example, this guy's pink, what is that? Connect. Pink identity. This is the identity server which we are going to talk about. There are a lot of paid actually services. Access Reliable, Microsoft Azure. This is Access Reliable, Scalable Identity Service with your Azure free account. Get started. Okta. This is Ned Barbettini's company. OAuth 0, sorry about that, and many others. Actually, the space is quite saturated, and they discussed all this into this video, Introduction to Identity Server for ASP.NET Core, which is removed from YouTube for some reason. Microsoft removed, maybe because it's old, May 11, 2019. In any case, we're gonna use the original documentation of Identity Server 4, even though they say that it's not that comprehensive, it's not that good, but still we're gonna use it. So one of our services actually is Identity Service. We always can switch, we always can replace this Identity Server with paid option or something, but we need Identity Server which implements the OAuth 2 OpenID Connect protocols, which we were talking about um, with the lection for Ned Barbettini and OAuth 2.0 and OpenID Connect in plain English. We had such a lection. So the identity is the pillar for our application, because we have to control the access. The security is very, very important. The security to our web services, our APIs. This is very, very important. Why don't we use a third party? For example, Facebook, Google, or the ones we actually mention here, because we don't have full control. And the best probably is going to be to build our own identity server, implementing the standards, the protocols, OAuth 2.0 and OpenID Connect. Let me read a little bit here and we will continue. Introduction, the big picture. So, most modern applications look more or less like this. We have a web API, we have a browser, native application, or even server application. And all they communicate with a web API. For example, the browser of the user goes to the web application, which could be MVC application. Actually, this is what we're gonna do in the next tutorial. Web application, and this web application doesn't communicate directly with the server as we did before, but instead it communicates with web API on behalf of the user who stays before front of the browser. Native application communicates directly with the web API, and server application, which stays somewhere on the server, communicates directly. This is what we are going to do actually. We will have one server application today which communicates with a web API, and the web API actually is going to have a protected resources, is not going to allow anybody actually to communicate, even if we first this server application is not somehow registered to the third party, which is Security Token Service, STS, and this STS actually grants authorization to the web application. Okay, the most common interactions are browser communicates with the web application communicates with the APIs, browser-based application communicates with the with web API, native applications, server-based applications, API communicates with web APIs. Actually, this is another revenue stream for us if we become a specialist in the security area, and especially in this security token services. We can offer security token services, even though the space is very saturated with a lot of providers, but still we can create something in different language, for example, similar to what they have in C#. For example, Python or PHP, we can create identity server in such a language. In any case, it's good to have our own identity server instead of a Google identity server, instead of using Google identity server, because we can customize every aspect of this identity server. The consent screen, for example, we can make it our own. We don't even have to show the consents screens for our users, for our resource owners, if we talk in terms of the OAuth 2.0. So this is what Identity Server actually is doing. Security token service. OAuth actually it implements the protocol. It implements everything what we were talking about. Endpoints, clients, resource owners, how it's sent, the code, how it's sent, and different flows and all this kind of stuff, so we don't have to do it. Initially I was thinking that we have to do it manually, but after that I saw that actually there is already a product, and because it's open source, it's done by many people, many eyes are looking into it. This is the best way to go, because they can find possible flows and fix it, and also it offers everything. It's good to have such tool which actually you don't know even the features of this tool, but it's good to have all the bells and whistles and to use it. Authentication is needed when the application needs to know the identity of the current user. Typically this applications manage data on behalf of that user, blah blah. API access, how the access should be organized. Applications have two fundamental ways with which they communicate with APIs: using the application identity or delegating the user identity. This is what we're gonna do with Identity Server. OpenID Connect and OAuth 2 better together. How IdentityServer4 can help us. This is the name of the project, and I will repeat again, said loudly. IdentityServer4 implements OAuth 2.0 OpenID Connect standards, so Identity Server easily can be replaced by any other identity server or service, security token service. And Microsoft Identity is a totally different project, and we can think of Microsoft Identity as a way for our code to communicate with the database and organize actually the communication with the database. It offers again the two-factor authentication, single sign-on, third party, and everything else, but not in the way the IdentityServer4 does it. Identity Server actually implements all the protocols, all the standard protocols, OAuth 2.0, OpenID Connect. So also allows us, IdentityServer4 allows us to use two-factor authentication, social login with Google and everything else, and on top of that is our own. We don't have to bother to create Facebook actually account and do something else. Okay, so let's get started actually. And just we'll go through the documentation very quickly, and after that we'll create that terminology. We know already the terminology. This is the resource owner, the user. The client is our application, which requires access to different resources, which are located on a different domain. So security token service, in this case identity server, which we're going to use, could be located in a totally different domain. Cookies also, for each domain actually are created cookies. The cookies are different, so it's totally different. It has nothing to do with our application, in fact, which is nothing else but uh, amalgamation of different APIs and applications. IdentityServer is an OpenID Connect provider. It implements the OpenID Connect and OAuth 2.0 protocol. Different literature use different terms, okay, user, client, resources. Identity token, an identity token represents the outcome of an authentication process. It contains at a bare minimum an identity identifier for the user called the subject claim. Those are the claims actually. All the information about the user are called claims. Access token, we can see this in Microsoft Identity, which is a totally different NuGet package. By the way, Identity Server is a NuGet package as well, but it offers templates which will allow us to start very quickly. OpenID Connect OAuth, those are the protocols which they implement. Packaging and bundling, Identity Server main repo. So let's take a look this. This is the Identity Server repo, and as we can see, this is the main project, IdentityServer4, IdentityServer4 QuickStart UI. Actually, you can use a UI. These guys are providing a UI for the consent page, for the login, registration on their identity server. Identity server templates, where we can start identity server demo. They have many other projects. They have NuGet packages which allow you to, for example, access token validation, to install this and validate the token. Tools which allow you, which put abstraction over the OpenID Connect and OAuth 2.0 and allow you to easily work. They hide from you the complication, the complex terms, and just allow you to work very, very easy. Just with a one line of code in the middleware and the request pipeline, you you expose actually different endpoints and this kind of stuff. So cross-version integration test, sandbox, artwork. As you can see in the repo, you can find the different projects which help you to build your application. But let's go back to the this is the Identity Server IO. They offer services, of course, paid training, production, whatever. So as you can see, the entire infrastructure is built around the security and this Identity Server, which provides the security token service. This security token service, as I said, could be on a different domain. We can do that if we go deep into this rabbit hole. Identity Server main repo contains the core Identity Server object model, services and middleware, as well as the entity framework and ASP.NET identity integration. Look at this, it has integration with identity. So those are two different projects, but I believe that registration and everything else could be done through the ASP.NET identity, and Identity Server will provide us with security token service. IdentityServer4, IdentityServer4 entity framework, ASP.NET identity. Great, great, great. Quick start, GitHub, the project which we are going to start right now. It's part of this access token validation handler. This could be installed in another third party or another actually ASP.NET Core application just to consume these tokens which are built. We'll see that. Templates. Development builds. templates allows us, instead of installing NuGet packages, just to start like MVC, like Razor pages immediately with IdentityServer. Dev builds. In addition, we publish continuous integration builds to our package repository. Add the following NuGet config to your project. Okay, so we're not gonna do that. Support and consulting options, free support, commercial support. They even have an administration UI, which is paid, of course, which allows you, like we did with Facebook or Google, to go there, register the client, give him a secret, give him a client ID, and all this kind of stuff. But this is paid. Admin UI, VS Federation, SAML protocol, FIDO2, and different kind of stuff. Demo server, we can click here and go and see the demo server. Why don't we do that? Welcome to IdentityServer Discover document. The very important part is that each security token service actually offers endpoints which are standardized. Look at this, it describes actually the standard endpoints. So in other words, Google, Facebook, all of them should have this URL. This could be google.com, whatever, but .well-known/OpenID configuration, all of these services should provide. So because it's not very well formatted, let me try with Edge. Let's see if Edge actually don't restore. If Edge can format this better, set as default. Unfortunately, print cast media to device, read the log, translate to English, view page. Okay, I don't have suitable plugins to show that, but just look at this. Issuer, demo identity server, JWT URI. On the left side, whatever we have is standardized in the standard OAuth to OpenID Connect. So all these magic words we can find everywhere on every security token service, and these are up to them actually to be implemented. Authorized endpoint, whatever. So this is the demo server. Let's continue with the startup. How to contribute, contribution. Of course we can contribute. This is another way to earn points. And here we go. This is what I wanted actually to get. Quick start preparation. The quick start provides step-by-step instructions for various common identity server scenarios, and this is I will do the first one today. I'll do the rest of course, and we're getting the pieces together now. We have the example application, which identity server doesn't work in the example application actually, which comes with the book, which we discovered, which we using. The identity is not working, so we first have to fix it, but in order to do that we have to deep dive into the identity server, because the demo application is using identity server, exactly this. Adding IdentityServer to ASP.NET Core application. The quick start provides step-by-step instructions for various common identity server scenarios. They start with the absolute basic and become more complex. It's recommended you do them in order. Adding IdentityServer to ASP.NET Core application. Configuring IdentityServer. Issuing token for various clients. Secure web applications and APIs. Adding support for entity framework based configuration, adding support for ASP.NET Identity. This is how we're gonna proceed. Every quick start has a reference solution. You can find the code samples here. I'm not gonna do that right now, but whoever wants actually can do it. So as you can see, we start with the identity server templates, which are into the repository. Here somewhere in the repository you can see the description of the templates. Here we go. It says if you use this command here, if you use this command, actually these templates will be added to your normal templates. Let me see if I already have them. Okay, I'm gonna go to the projects, the trash. Okay, let me see, what do I have here? Okay, we have quite a lot of things, but here I'm gonna add this project. Let me see, .NET ---- version, just to make sure. Which version do I have? 3.1.4, I guess, is the last one. .NET new ---- help, just to see, do I have these templates? Probably not. Who knows? Ah, I do have already them. So I did this command and it added all these identity server templates, which means that with one line of a code, I create my own identity server. I create my own STS security token server like Facebook, like Google, like anybody else, and it's my own. This doesn't prevent me, of course, for identity server can be configured, so it uses the social login. In other words, is using another security token service, is using another actually OpenID Connect server, which will allow us to log in with Facebook, Google, whatever, to use two-factor authentication, and so on and so forth. So we're free, but this identity server is going to be our own. Okay, so I have already this, I have done it. .NET new -i identity server templates, which means install these templates. I already have them. So I executed this command. They will be used as string starting points for various tutorials. If you're using private NuGet source, do not forget to add the NuGet source parameter. NuGet source, we are not using such thing. Okay, let's get started. The quick start, target the IdentityServer4 and ASP.NET Core 3.1.4 is mine. There are also quick starts for the OAuth. I'm not gonna look at that. Protecting API using client credentials. So we'll have a console application which is trying to access one API application. We know how to deal with API applications for our previous tutorials, and we will have a STS security token service, token service, which is implemented using IdentityServer, IdentityServer4. Thanks God we're using .NET and C# because in this technology, as you can see, there is already a solution. We have IdentityServer. So our client application should be registered here in the IdentityServer. And first, it has to connect to IdentityServer. IdentityServer will return token. Also, the API should know who is responsible for issuing tokens. And once our client application, which is the console application, has a token, obtains the token, is gonna turn to the API, ask for the information and get it, but as I said, with the token. So let's get this done. Let's do it. The following IdentityServer4 QuickStart provides step-by-step instructions for various common identity server scenarios. This starts with absolute basic and become more complex as they progress. We recommend that you follow them in sequence. To see the full list, please go to the IdentityServer QuickStart overview. We're here anyway, so we saw it already. The first quick start is most basic scenario for protecting API using IdentityServer. In this quick start, we define an API and a client with which to access it. The client will request, the client is a console application, the client will request an access token from the IdentityServer using its client ID, and secret will then use the token to gain access to the API. source code, as with all of these quick starts, you can find the source code for it. Then server repository, we saw this already here in the repositories. Here we go, the demos. I'm not gonna do that, of course. Preparation, the identity server templates for the .NET. We can start with the, of course, with absolutely empty application, and after that add the do-get packages, but why not use one of their templates. This one is with admin UI, this one is ASP-ID. We can start with empty. After that we'll see what we're gonna do. UI also, consent screen, login, whatever, entity framework. They are described here in the repo. So if we go down, we can find it. Notice something, .NET new templates for Identity Server. I noticed this. Create a minimum IdentityServer4 project without UI. And the rest of the the rest of the templates actually don't create the new applications. They add to the existing applications. Add the QuickStart UI to the current projects. Can be, for example, Gravy added on top of IdentityServer4. Adds a basic identity server with UI. Test users as sample clients. Show both. This is in memory, doesn't communicate with the database to read the clients, to read the secrets and all this kind of stuff. .NET ID adds a basic identity server that uses ASP.NET Identity. Great for user management. In other words, we'll have both projects. We will have Identity, Microsoft Identity, which already offers actually social network, social login, registration, login page, and all this kind of stuff. And on top of that, it adds Identity Server. So Identity Server will work like that. If you automatically see the database and actually works with the database, so everything is going to be in the database. .NET Identity Framework adds a basic identity server that uses Entity Framework for configuration and state management. So the management of the identity server could be done into the database, not outside with the files outside of the database. And .NET New is admin. This actually adds an admin interface which allows us to ask our customers, our clients, which are developers, to register their clients and use our identity server. But this is a paid option, as you can see here, up to 10 users for free and 2 clients, and that's it. Installation .NET New Identity Server templates. This is how you install them. If you want to remove them, .NET New Debugger Reinit. Okay, I'm not gonna do Reinit right now. I don't want to experiment with that. So let's go further. .NET. This is done already, as we said. Setting up ASP.NET Core application. It's quite simple. Go there in the trash, paste it. Come on. Didn't I copy this? Okay, QuickStart. MD QuickStart has been created. Notepad. I'm gonna create actually QuickStart. Oh, come on. Yes, created QuickStart txt. This is exactly what I wanted. MD QuickStart. Of course, I'm gonna rename it. I'm gonna put here the link to the tutorial which I have used. The application was created following this tutorial. We gotta be organized, otherwise I'm getting lost. So let me see, what do we have here right now? Move MD whatever just to QuickStart txt. Hopefully this is gonna work, because it works for yeah, ls just QuickStart. Do you see it? Yeah, I do see it. Okay, that's it. Now change directory, QuickStart. QuickStart could be many things, but whatever. So change directory, QuickStart. I went there, create another folder inside, which is gonna be called source. Look at this, the source, the structure of the project looks different. Now change directory source. Notice something, QuickStart is gonna be the solution. Inside we are putting source folder, and into the source folder are gonna be the three applications. One of them is IdentityServer, another one is API standard .NET API, and the third one is the console application or the client. Ls, then we don't have anything, and now we're gonna create a new application here, new in the source. The namespace is IdentityServer.NET new -n IdentityServer. Let me see if it's gonna create this in a separate folder. I think yes, it has been created in a separate folder, IdentityServer. We can go there if we like. Identity, of course. Ls, here we go, the application. Only 4 files have been created. Very simple. One folder, properties, and only few files. That's it, nothing more. I wanna keep it pure as much as possible. That's why I'm not gonna open it right now with Visual Studio Code. Gonna open this with Notepad++, maybe. Notepad++ config. Let me see if that's gonna work. Notepad++. No. Okay, so run Notepad++. Let me see if that works. Run start launch start. Here we go. I found it finally. So this is how it goes. And right now I'm gonna see it like that. ls. So notepad, and I'm gonna say config. No, I don't want to create this. Okay. Config.cs. Why don't you help me a little bit? Okay, let me look at the config file and all this kind of stuff right now. So the config file, as you can see, is identity server namespace, static config. We have here config. So we have to configure, this is a configuration file for identity server. We have to configure the resources which we're gonna protect with this identity server, the scopes, different APIs, and the clients. The scopes and the clients. Okay, where is that now? It should be at the end, so I have to close it right there, like that. What else do we have here? We have, instead of config, we have identity C# project. Look at this. Already dependency on IdentityServer4, which is still not installed, but is gonna be when we run it with Visual Studio Prime or Visual Studio Code. Serilock ASP.NET Core. This is another NuGet package, which actually is logging the information, errors, whatever. Let's see, what else do we have? Program here. Program CS, as you can see. Program and the startup, of course. Program, the standard entry points of the application. Static int main. Log, this is where we're using this NuGet package for logging, minimum level logging, whatever, information, exception, log, iHost builder, standard stuff. We're not gonna look this too much. And the last one, startup. Actually, it's not the last one, the startup. So for this spell, actually, we use the templates. Public configure services and configure, the most important methods here. There are only two. This is the As you can see, this is the middleware, and all the magic happens in the middleware. It's a matter of one line: services add identity server options, and after that we say where are the configurations, and the configurations are coming from the config file, config identity resources, memory, config API scopes, and config clients. Those are the clients. We have to register our application, our client, which is the console application, and this is a regular stuff. Uncomment if you want to add the MVC based UI. Right now it's stopped because we don't need it. Right now there is no UI, just to minimize the attack surface for the hackers. Services add controllers with views. As you can see, we don't even have controllers and views, even though this is one empty MVC application. We don't have or Razor page. We don't even have such thing. Builder add developer sign credential. This is for our pair security keys configuration. Application builder application environment is developer app developer exception page. And as you can see, uncomment if you want to have MVC. We don't even want MVC. App use identity server, and that's it. This is the startup. We look at the program already, and there is one file more which is in properties folder, ls. So we're gonna do here launch JSON. Look at this. It determines the port where the application starts. If I started with .NET Run right now, it's gonna use Kestrel. If I open this in Visual Studio and add this project to the Visual Studio solution, it's going to be opened with IIS Express, which gives the random port, but the configuration right now is for Kestrel. Okay, so that's it, common name project, whatever. So let me close this, and go back. So it explains the files. We already look at the files. IdentityServer project, we saw there are two NuGet packages, properties, how to launch program and start up the main application entry point config. IdentityServer, this is specific for IdentityServer. If we add support for entity framework, actually we can communicate with the database, and this configuration could be into the database. Resources and clients configuration file. You can now use a favorite text editor to edit view files if you want to have Visual Studio support. Okay, if you want to have look, the guys even tell us how to create a solution file. Once I remember we had a lecture when I did all this manually, but as you can see, .NET, this command line tool, clip, actually has a command to create the solution, and the solution shouldn't be in the source folder. Should be here in QuickStart. Yeah. Let me think again. What did we do? Make QuickStart, change QuickStart in source, and after that we step out of this directory one folder up, which is exactly QuickStart, and I'm in the proper place. I'm in QuickStart, so I'm gonna create a solution folder, QuickStart, a solution file. And this solution file, actually, to this solution file, we have to add the project. Let me look at the solution, because we wanna see everything here. Quick solution, look at the solution. Nothing special. We already have done this, as I said once. And now to this solution we have to add the project, and we will be able to open this project with Visual Studio Code, with Visual Studio Prime, whatever we like, and let it add your IdentityServer project. Keep this command in mind as we will create other projects below. So if you want to add this project to the solution, because right now the solution is empty, this is what we have to execute here. It says .NET solution add, and the path to the identity server C proj file where the NuGet packages and everything is. Okay, that's it. So to answer one question of George, so the name of the application is Identity Server. The application is actually it's a compilation of different files which at the end get together as a big source file by the compiler, and that's it. We have different files which create one program, and the identity server is the pillar, actually is the glue which glues together everything. Okay, so that's it. And it's a metadata. In identity server we don't have a code, actually we have only metadata. Now if I open again solution, you'll see that a GUID is given to this identity server, application, this project, and we have a path to this project, and here we go, different parameters are added, so we're not gonna look at this anymore like that. So now let me see, the protocol used in this template is HTTPS, and the port is set to 5001. We saw this in property launch setting JSON when running on Kestrel or a random one on IIS Express. So if we open this project in Visual Studio, IIS is going to run this project on a random port, but I'm going to stay in the console as usual. For production scenario, you should always use HTTPS. Okay, so how can we run this application? Very simple. Look at the organization, paste into the source, identity server, and here we can say .NET run. There is no much going on right now, but .NET run, identity server information. Look, they prefer actually to have a lot of console output here. This is set up in the program file, program CS, and identity server. Okay, now it's not gonna answer here because the surface is minimized, but if we go to very well known, look at this, our server actually it's working and it's answering different, it's serving different requests. So we can even say localhost, well-known OpenID configuration, JWTs. And as I said, all these spells actually are typical for all STS, for all security token services. Okay, so it works. We saw that it works. Now we can stop it. I just didn't want to pollute the with different things. Object and bin has been created when I said run. Of course, I can say build, an object and bin will be built. In any case, in bin debug. Okay, so let me look at the bin folder. In debug, ls, netcore, application, ls, look at this, the DLL files and everything has been created. Identity model, DLL, identity server, debs, JSON. Where this all DLLs are coming from, those are from NuGet package managers because our application has a lot of dependencies. Serious, blah blah, identity server, DLL4, model, identity server DLL, here we go, and identity server exec. This is actually our application. Okay, so nothing special, I just wanted to take a look. So even for production, we just have to say build production, and we'll get the code. I'm in identity server right now, so I can open it if I like with Visual Studio Code or whatever. How did I end up here? Okay, so defining an API scope. let's open this both ways if we like. We can say here, while we are in the identity server, we can say code, open this into the code, and here we go. Again, bin obj. Now it's gonna warn me that there is no .vs code folder, whatever. Team welcome version extensions, Azerepo, welcome to version of the Azerepos extension. This is not interesting, but in the config, we have something to do in the config. Hopefully one day is gonna ask me to add whatever it's necessary. Okay, let's continue. So the configuration right now, we have to register one application. That's it. In API, an API is a resource in your system that you want to protect. Resources defined can be loaded in many ways. The template, let me check something. Yeah, hopefully I'm recording right now. The template you use to create the project above shows how to use the code as configuration approach. The config CS already created for you. Open it, update it to code look like this. Okay, so right now in the scope, actually here in the scope, we say that the client can ask for access token to access one API, which is a third-party application. So these three applications actually, I think, could belong to three different organizations. One of them is IP's IdentityServer, which, for example, we own, but the API is created by somebody else, and the console application is created by somebody else. And this somebody else, which is the client, wants access to the API, and the API decided that is going to trust us to protect from unauthorized access. So let me first define a scope here. Required assets, yes, I'm expecting Visual Studio Code here. Okay, so identity resources, here we go. Identity scope, public static. Look at this. Initially it was array on API scopes. Right now they use list, which is a data structure, which is much more flexible than array, simple array. For arrays, you always have to say first how big the array should be and this kind of stuff. For the list, we don't have that, we don't need that. Okay, so API scopes, we can even remove the identity resources, but let's leave it as it is right now. See the full code here. Look at this, they don't even have scope client, they don't have resources. If you will be using this in a production, it's important to give your API a logical name, of course. Right now API 1 it doesn't very descriptive, it's not very descriptive. Developers will be using this to connect to your API though. Your identity server, it should describe your API in simple terms to both developers and users. Defining the client. Next step is to define a client application that will use to access your new API. For this scenario, the client will not have an interactive user and will automatically using the so-called client secret with identity server. Right now, our console application is going to communicate directly to the STS, to the security token service, which is identity server. Public, static, enumerable, clients, blah blah, new list. Copy this, paste it here because otherwise we won't have enough time. And this tutorial is gonna become too long. I'm not adding anything right now. We are just what happens now? Let me show you this. Let me see it actually. Yeah. because the closing braces are not indented when we use lambdas as we do right now. So that's why it's a little bit bothering me. So the client ID is called just client. Our application will have a simple name. Our client is going to have a simple name. Otherwise, I can call it a console application. No interactive user. Use the client secret for authentication. Our client is not going to redirect the users to the STS. This is very simple scenario. So the user always will, the user of the client actually is always gonna get the information from the API, but the client will identify itself through the token using the token, and the secret, the password actually for the client is just called secret, and allowed scope API1. Okay, so this is what we say about the client. This client is called client. Its secret is just the secret, and its name is API1, and we already set this as a scope, so somebody can ask for access. Some client can ask for access, and we can actually comment out this. It's not gonna run without this before we make more changes. You can think of the client ID and client secret as the login and password for your application itself. It identifies your application to the identity server so that it knows which application is trying to connect to configuring identity server. Now we have to configure the identity server, load the resources and client definitions happens in startups, yes, of course. Now let's go to the startup. As we know, in the startup we have a problem right now because look, we commented at all resources. I'm going to comment this, and everything is going to be happy again, because from this static config class actually we're using identity resources. Okay, and identity resources I commented out. We don't need resources right now for this simple communication, but in the future we're going to use the resources as well. Well, those resources are the email, for example, of the user, or the profile of the user, and different things, the resource owner. Right now we have only scope and client. Of course, if we don't comment client, we can uncomment here. We can go here and uncomment this as well, and nobody's gonna complain because the startup right now will have access to the identity resources, which is gonna be empty. But let's follow the tutorial. Oops, what did I do? Okay, so let's comment out this. Let's comment out this as well. Control+C, save it, save it. I can even run the application right now. I run it from the console. I can run it with Control F5 here. The application runs. It's gonna tell me that on port 5001. Actually, I have access, and as we already discussed, to minimize the surface, but very well known, works. Voila! This is the proof that the application works. I'm gonna stop it now. Right now, I can open this in Visual Studio and run it from there. Okay, let me do that, because as you can see we have a solution. Come on. It's in projects, in trash, and here we have QuickStart. And if I click on the solution, it's gonna open up the Visual Studio Prime, and I'm gonna start the application from Visual Studio Prime, and we'll see the port which is going to be used by the Visual Studio Prime. Probably the configuration is gonna change. Yeah, I don't have a problem. Project loaded and ready to use, blah blah, but I see that it's doing something. We see here the cproch file, as you can see, which is invisible in Visual Studio. Of course, I can force it to show, but whatever. So now it's ready. Control F5. Let's see the port on which is gonna run this. Again, the same, very same port, 501. Let me refresh it here, and we'll see that very well known OpenID configuration works. I'm gonna refresh again, just pull it. Okay, start discovery request. I'm gonna stop this, press any key to close it, and the application has been stopped. I'm gonna close the Visual Studio. Let me show you the properties, launch settings. Yeah, the Visual Studio didn't have anything else. Okay, I'm just gonna close that. We don't need it. We'll continue working from the console. But at one point I'm gonna go back again to the Visual Studio Prime. Okay, so that's it now. The configuration actually code. The configuration actually has been done. Welcome, close it, start it. Okay, so now let's continue further. That's it. Your identity server should now be configured. If you run the server and navigate to the browser to the very well open configuration, you should see the so-called discovery document. All, I will repeat that, all STSs, all the security token services should have such URL dot very well well-known OpenID configuration where we can see all the endpoints. The discovery document is standard endpoint in identity servers. The discovery document will be used by your clients and APIs to download the necessary configuration data. And thanks God, here is formatted well, so we have such thing. So in other words, everything on the left comes from the standard on the OpenID Connect OAuth 2. And the rest is up to the identity server to implement. So all these are different from Google, from Facebook, but on the left everything is the same. The same here. Claim support, grant type supported, all these spells, all these words are reserved. At first startup, identity server will create a developer signing key for you. It's a file called 10key.rsa. You don't have to check that file into your source code or control. It will be recreated if it's not present. Let me see if I do have something like that. 10key JWT. Here we go. Let me see it. Let me see it here. Here we go. Here we go. The file has been created for me. Okay, I didn't notice when, but the file is created and it's into the folder. Okay, let's continue. Adding an API. Now let's create. We have the identity server. That's it. That's all necessary for the identity server. If the identity server is not gonna offer login registration for the users, it's gonna be simple like this. It's gonna just control the access of clients to API. This is how it's done. Of course, we will do the login and registration as well later on in another tutorial. Next, add an API to your solution. .NET new API. Let's go and create the API. Now we have to step up. And now here in source, we are creating .NET new web API. -n API is gonna be the namespace and the folder in which is gonna be put this project. This is a brand new simple web API project. ls, here we go, API. I can run it, of course. Come on, ls. I can run it. Weather forecast CS is one example. It's gonna run though on port 5001, the same port on which our identity server is running. So we have to change the startup configurations, but just for fun, let's run it. We'll close it. .NET run. So nothing special. One line of code, and we have the API running on, notice this, localhost 5001, and of course the APIs like identity server, If you go to 5001, you won't find anything. You have to point browser to the endpoint, which is weather forecast. Weather forecast, I have it here because I have done it many times. So we have already controller which responds, and it gives you the weather forecast. This is the endpoint. We get, put, post, and delete HTTP methods. Okay, that's it. So it works. It works. Now we have to protect it. So only the guys which are allowed, in this case only one client application, which is a console application, should be able to get this weather information, for example. Of course, we're gonna do something else in this tutorial. Let me continue with that. Okay, change directory solution. Yeah, if we wanna add this project to the solution, we go there and we add to the solution file this project. So if we open this application, project source, blah blah blah, added to the solution. If we open again with the solution with the Visual Studio Prime, we won't have any problems. Configure the API application to run the HTTP localhost only. You can do this by editing the launch setting JSON, which is in properties. Okay, let's go there. Source API, properties, project properties. Yeah, exactly. ls, we can change this with even with Notepad. Of course, I have Visual Studio Code, but what? Yeah, of course, Notepad and whatever it is, JSON. Look at this now. JSON skin blah 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 SSL port application URL for Internet Information Services Express. In other words, if you run it with Visual Studio IS Express, and here we go, 6001 6000. Let's change the ports here. Not sure we have to change these ports as well. Let me save it, close it, and run it. Actually, I have it here already. No, I don't have it. I have to open the entire folder in order to have all this, the 3 projects in one Visual Studio Code. But in any case, properties, let me go back. Let's say .NET Run. .NET Run. API should run now 6001. Here we go. It runs on 6001. I just gonna change this IP and this port, run it. I'm curious to see if I run it from Visual Studio, what's gonna happen now. Let's go back. Let's stop it here. So I'm running each one project individually here. In Visual Studio we can run 2-3 projects at the same time, just for fun. Not this one. Let's go to File Explorer. Let's go to File Explorer. So because we're experimenting right now, projects, trash, QuickStart, and I'm gonna open QuickStart. I should have 2 projects right now which have been added from the CLI command line interface. I could do this even manually, but with one line of code is done. So localhost, IdentityServer, and here we go, the API. Now, if I wanna control what I'm running, I can say, for example, something like single. Right now, IdentityServer. If I press Ctrl F5, current selected. Okay, I'm gonna select API, and if I hit Ctrl F5, it's gonna run this one. Look, it runs on a random port. Look at this, random port. So we have to be careful with Visual Studio Prime because the configuration there tells the Visual Studio to run it in a different port. As you can see, If we run it with Kestrel, which we do from the console and from Visual Studio Code, it runs on 6001. If we run it with Visual Studio, it runs on a different port, which we can see actually here in the properties, launch settings. Here we go. You can change this port to 6001, but I just will keep it different by purpose application URL. Just remember that when you run it in Visual Studio, actually Prime, you run it in a different port. I'm gonna close it right now, and I'm gonna continue from the console. If I run it from here, it's gonna run again on 6001 because it runs on a different server. This one is not gonna respond, of course, right now. Here we go, but if I go to 6001, it works. Okay, perfect. We're gonna close this and let's continue with the tutorial. The next thing, application localhost 6000, the controller. Now let's add the controller, so we will have a different endpoint, not only weather forecast. Let me open this in actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go there and say code dot. So I'm gonna open the source folder, which contains the 3 projects. API right now, team welcome, I don't know, I don't want that. IdentityServer, and I have the API as well. So now, required assets, yes, okay. Select the project to launch, okay. What to tell you? Okay, let's choose the API right now. We can control this here as well. We'll open it with Visual Studio Prime at one point. Again, okay, right now if I hit Control F5, it's going to run an API. So now this is what we have right now. We have only weather forecast CS. This is the information which is returned, and we have only one controller, weather forecast controller. This is typical structure of the API, of one API. We'll create a new controller which is gonna do more interesting things. We'll create identity controller. Let's create this controller. New file, identity controller CS. Let me see something. Let's see the temperature of my machine. Okay, it's not that bad, but I'm gonna turn this off now. Okay, so let's go back. Class public, blah 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 blah. So look at this, how easy it is right now to protect this API. All we're gonna say is root identity. So if the user types 6001/identity is gonna come to our endpoint, authorize public class identity controller base. Of course, we have to hit control dot. Using Microsoft ASP.NET MVC, authorize control dot. Using ASP authorization, user claim, using system link queue. Okay, this is a link queue, language internal query. We didn't pay too much attention on that, but this is another rabbit hole. It allows us to use something like SQL for data structures which we have in our program. For example, we have a list user claims. This is a list of all user claims. Instead of iterating between the traversing actually the properties, the elements with 4 cycles, we are using loops. We are using from return new JSON result. Okay, let's read what it does. The controller will be used later to test the authorization requirement, as well as visualize the claim identity through the eyes of the API. So the identity, API is going to see the claims, who is the client, who is trying to access it, and all this kind of stuff. And it's going to return it back to the console application, to the client, so the client can show all this. Adding a NuGet dependency. In order for the configuration step to work, the NuGet package dependency has to be added. Run this command on the root directory .NET add source application simple package Microservices JW barrier. Okay, let's do that now, because this is notice something. This is Microsoft. Microsoft has created this library to allow us actually to use JWT barriers. Okay, API .NET add source. Actually, we have to be back. Okay, so .NET add source API C package Microsoft. So we have to be here relatively to the path, and what we are telling is add to API C project. Let me open this. We'll see what's going on, what's going to happen. Add the dependency to JWT or JWT. Add the dependency to JWT barrier. Okay, so JWT, restoring packages, blah 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 blah. Because it's not only adding the source. Here we go. Package include JWT, but also installing the packages. So that's why it doesn't take just few fractions of a second. It takes longer. Okay, so now let's continue. Configuration. The last step is to add the authentication service to dependency injection and the authentication middleware to the pipeline. This is how one API protects itself using the IdentityServer. We will see how to protect one API, and this is what we're gonna do with our microservices. It's that simple. Actually, it's a little bit more complicated because our APIs are not gonna protect themselves. OAuth, this is API gateway. Actually, another project like IdentityServer is gonna use the tokens. Actually, it's gonna protect the services, the APIs which stay behind it. The API gateway, OAuth, this is the name of the project, like the IdentityServer is the name for the STS, Security Token Service, which we just created. So OAuth is the name of the API gateway. It's going to protect, but if we don't have that, and if we want to expose some of our APIs, this is the way to do it. The API will expose itself, but is going to be protected by the Security Token Service, IdentityServer. So update the startup to look like this. Okay, let's go there and do it. Now, in the API, we added the package. We're going to the startup right now. And look at this. This method gets called by the runtime, blah, 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 blah. Configure services. We're not going to replace everything. Services add controllers, and after that, it's us. After that, we're going to do this. Service add authentication barrier. That's why we needed this bearer library. Add JWT bearer options, authority, who actually is gonna create the token, options, token validate parameters, new token validation parameters, validate out false, and that's it. We just have to know the spell, that's it. Token validation parameters, probably we need another NuGet identity. No. Okay, so it's there. And now let's see configure. Let's see configure. Look, it's absolutely simple. we could leave actually if environment is development app development exception page. To show the exception page, use routing HTTP redirect. We're gonna comment out this. The rest, I guess, is exactly what they have. Use routing, use routing, use authentication, use authorization. Use authentication right now. And endpoints is exactly the same. Follow the controllers. Okay, that's it. So it's quite simple. We commented out whatever came with the standard template. Auth authentication adds the authentication service to dependency injection and configures barrier as the default scheme. Use authentication. Use authentication. This is the auth here. Auth authentication. In the configure services, and here in the configure we have auth authentication. Use authentication. Add the authentication middleware to the pipeline, so authentication will be performed automatically on every call in the host. Use authorization. Add the authorization middleware to make sure your API endpoint cannot be accessed by anyone clients, anonymous clients. Navigate to the controller. Identity on a browser should return 401. Okay, let's start the application. Controller 5 here is configured to be the default application right now, which is going to run, not IdentityServer. And I'm going to try to go to 6001. Identity, and it should give me 401. Yeah, it's not 404, not found, but if the problem continues, contact the site owner. HTTP error 401, not allow it. Let me see, the weather forecast is not protected, so that's why we can access this one. Look at this API controller, whatever, but notice we don't have authorize. If I put authorize in the weather forecast controller, it's going to require authorization as well. Okay, so this is how simple we protect our APIs, our endpoints. Okay, and all the complexity which we discussed with Nate Barbettini, OAuth 2.0, OpenID Connect, which we have otherwise we have to do manually, it's hidden for us. It's abstracted out for us. Okay, let's continue now. Navigate 401 status code. This means your API request requires a credential, and it's now protected by IdentityServer. If you're wondering why the above code disable audience validation, have a look here for a more in-depth discussion. I'm not interested right now. Create the client. This is a simple console application. You can tell by looking here. So let me stop this. Let me create a console application first. QuickStart. Okay. I guess in QuickStart .NET console minus client, so I have to go to the source. Okay. Client. This is our client. Of course, the use case which we have is much more difficult because we have MVC application which is going to be client. This client is going to require access to APIs, to different APIs. This MVC application should redirect which is the client, should redirect the user, the resource owner, to the identity server. Identity server should present the user with the login or register, or with a consent if it's already logged in, consent screen, and says, for example, the client wants to access your information, blah 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 blah, and so on and so forth. Okay, so hopefully everything works because I paused this and now I continue working, but Hopefully it's gonna work. Again. And, okay, so that's it. Now, .NET Console client, did I create this? Yes, I did. So ls client, this is the client application. Then, as before, add it to the solution dial, of course. In order to be into the solution file, we have to go there and say this. Okay, now into the solution we have three projects. If I go here, I should see it somewhere here. Here we go, client, IdentityServer, VS Code, API. So here we go, the client. The client is absolutely simple, of course. As you can guess, it's only one class. The token endpoint and IdentityServer implements the OAuth 2.0 protocol, and you could use raw HTTP to access it. However, in other words, we can do it manually. We can turn to the API. We have to turn to the IdentityServer and request token, because we are registered client. We can see this where, let me close all this. With a forecast, we don't need that, of course. API projects, here in IdentityServer, in configuration, which is not into the database, we have the client. Here we go. Its name is client and the password is secret. Secret is secret. Okay, this is how we configure our client. So if we know that, we have to do it manually. We have to turn to this IdentityServer, say I'm a client, my secret is secret, give me a token. It's going to return the token. With this token right now, the client should turn to the API and say, I'm a client, here we go, my token. It has been issued by someone which you know, which you trust. Please give me the access to the API, and so on and so forth. So that's it. However, we have a client library. This comes from IdentityServer4 project, again called Identity Model, and this helps tremendously with this communication that encapsulates the protocol interaction in an easy-to-use API. Add the identity model. Change directory source, church client, .NET client, identity model client is with the capital C, here is with small c, doesn't really matter for Microsoft. This is not Linux. Source, here we will say client, so we are in the folder of the client, and we will say add package identity model. Identity model, I repeat again, it comes from IdentityServer. They have created libraries, tools which will help us in such situation. Identity model includes a client library to use with the discovery endpoint. So we are using the discovery endpoint. This way, you only need to know the base address of IdentityServer. If we know the base address, which is 5001, in our case, the actual endpoint address can be read from the metadata, and this is what we have to add in our code here. All we do in our client is we have only this. So we're going to comment out this. I like to do it this way. I'm going to move here. Okay, so HTTP client. And look at this. Discover await client. Of course, this should be, in this case, async. Await client get discovery document async, and we give the base URL. Discovery error if cannot discover the well-known blah 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 is gonna return error, but because of this await we should have something. It's not giving me errors. In any case, in Visual Studio Prime, we'll see it again. Next, you can use the information from the discovery document to request a token to IdentityServer to access API. So this is the scope API, console write token JSON. Look at this, absolutely simple. So from the console application, we first go to the identity server and even to discovery page, even to discovery endpoint, where we discover all the endpoints, and after that we have them. Token response, await client, request client credentials, token async, void async, probably we're missing here. We should be missing async, await. If we have await, we have to have async here. I don't remember async. No, await async. It's not completing now. Let me see. In any case, let me see the full code. Yeah, task main. We should return task main. Var contain response read async string blah blah call API. The third one is the call API. Let me finish, and after that I'm gonna copy everything. Copy and paste the access token from the console to JWTs to inspect the raw token. Note JWTs. JWTs. Okay, I'm gonna keep that decode token. We'll do that just in a second, calling the API. And now the third is called API. So we turn to the base URL, we get all the information about the endpoint, so we will know everything about this STS, security token service. After that, request the token, and at the end, we just print back whatever comes from the API. And the API actually is going to return out back the information. Here we call the API 601 identity. Here we turn to the identity server, call API, IP client, HTTP client, IP client, set barrier token, token response success token, response, and all this magic happens thanks to the this NuGet package package which we have here. Okay, so console API parse. You know what? I'm gonna switch to Visual Studio Prime, even though I'm sure that is not gonna be a problem right now. Calling the API. Just this async and task private statics, not void, but return task. Let me actually try that. Static main async. Okay, so static async task main is going to return a task. Return view console client console write line. So we are done. We are ready actually. So I have to run the 3 projects at the same time, and finally run the console one. So this is fun. Let's do that. I'm not gonna run it from Visual Studio Code. So client is the last one to run. I'm gonna go here to the identity server, and I'm gonna say .NET run. This is one way to run it. This is one way to start all this. There are other ways as well. Okay, so I'm gonna open PowerShell here. Go to the project, trash, QuickStart, source, API, and I'm gonna run it. .NET run. Okay, so now I have the API running as well. And in the third one, PowerShell, I'm going to run the client. D, change directory projects, change directory trash, change directory QuickStart, source, client. And now I'm going to say .NET run and see what happens now. Hopefully everything is gonna work. Oh no, project QuickStart client, what does it say? Error, the type or namespace, name task could not be found, blah 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 blah. Okay. So why you're not complaining? No actions available, task. Okay, so I'm missing a using statement. Obviously. Here we go. Do you know what? Just for any case. Yeah, let me try that. Model client. Look, I have only system, which is absolutely not enough. Using threading task, system, Newton JSON link queue. Actually, Newton JSON link queue is another dependency. And I'm not quite sure that Newton Soft is installed right now, so it's gonna give me again error probably, but we will see, because when I try to run it, this is another dependency which is not resolved. But it runs. Everything runs. So access token, they say copy this token and paste it here to see it. We'll see the exact same things which we saw actually already. Enter token below, and here we go. Look at now here the results. So this actually comes from the API. This is the API answer, and this is what we got from the ID server. This is what we got from the IP server. IP, not ID, identity server. And with this token, actually, we access the API, and the API is set up, so it returns the very same things, but this comes from the API. So look at this. RS256 kit add JWT NBF type NBF. Here we go. Expiry. We can find it somewhere. Here we go. Expired. ISS is 501. Out. Resources. Okay, if I stop here, zoom it, we can see exact same things. JTY, out, expire, blah blah, scope, API. So it works, it perfectly works. Let's continue reading, and I'm gonna run it in Visual Studio Prime. So calling the API, we call the API, and this is what we see. If you're in Visual Studio, you can right click on the solution and select multiple setup. Let's do that. It's just for fun to show that we can have a multiple setup. I'm gonna stop right now everything. Control C, Control C. And I'm gonna stop here as well. Control C, Control C. I'm gonna close this because I don't need it anymore. Solution, quick start solution. Let's start it. Let's see how that goes. Now, how that works. Okay. We're close to 2 hours, but 1:30 is not that bad yet. So all I have to do is I have 3 projects, click on the solution and say properties. So here, instead of current selected, I'll say multiple startup. Identity server should start. So should start, API should start, and client shouldn't start. So if I hit F5 right now, or Control F5, of course it's not going to work because the IP ports, but I'm going to change the client. If I say Control F5, 2 projects will run, API and Identity Server, and they both work. Weather forecast and localhost 4001. Look at this. Now what I gotta do now is only in the console, in the client, I could change it. It's gonna be here. Responsible client get a sync, blah 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 blah. Instead of this one, I will use this port. And I'm gonna comment this and put it here 601. Okay, so now if I want to run this client, I have to say debug, start new instance, and we'll see what happens. We should get the exact same results as we did before from the console. First we have to get the JWT, and after that we get one error, I guess. Or client exe has exited with code 0. Oh yeah, okay, so again, debug, start new instance. So anonymous hosts the dynamic modes assembly, team, blah 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 blah. This is the identity, it's running there. Strange, I cannot see the results. But there is no problem. Anyway, so console, I can say console readline, console readline. Let me run it now and see what happens. Debug, start new instance, and here we go. Voila, the same results. If I hit enter now, it's gonna close, and that's it. Okay, so there is another thing to do here. So we saw how to run this in Visual Studio Prime. By default, an access token will contain claims about the scope, lifetime, NBF, and expiry, the client ID, and the issued name. By the way, scope API, client ID, the issuer. Here we go. This is the issuer. This is the name of the client, and this is what the client wants to access, and the access has been granted. Signature, and after that they actually input the signature. Let me see, there is a JWT IO, which does the very same thing. JWT one more, debug, whatever. So just let me copy the JWT from here Actually, in the tutorial, Microsoft asked us to use their, look at this, their decoder, but we always can use this JWT. Actually, I have opened two windows with JWT, so two tabs. I just have to paste it here and I'll get the exact same information. Okay, who is the issuer? 5001. Resources, blah blah. Who we are trying to access? API 1. Who is the client? His name is client. That's it. So this is the resource we are trying to access. This is the name of the client. Of course, the secret is not shown. And this is the authority which actually is giving us the token. Okay, the very same thing. Authorization at the API. Right now, the API accepts any access token issued by our identity server. Okay. In the following, we will add code that allows checking for the presence of the scope in the access token that the client asked for and got granted. For this, we will use the ASP.NET 4 authorization policy system. Add the following to configure services method in startup. That's about the API. So let me open the API and let me go to startup. The magic happens there. Barrier. So now configure services. Oh my god. Let me decrease a little bit the font because otherwise I just get lost here. Okay, so options, add policy, blah blah. Service add authorization options here. Service add authentication. Here we have service add authorization options add policy API scope policy require authenticated user policy request claim scope API. Okay, this is to configure services. Let me add this one. Now authorization, because we're checking only if our client has authentication, but we don't check for authorization. API scope, you can now enforce this policy at various levels, global for API endpoints for specific. Typically, you set up the policy for all API endpoints in the routing system. Now, we will go to the configure, and even the weather right now service which we have is not going to be accessible anymore. Look at this, the change is only this one. Map endpoint controllers, endpoint map controllers, here we go. We just add this. Oops. And that's it. Now, if I try, even the weather is not gonna happen. That API. Now I can run again both IdentityServer4 and API, Control F5. Run without debugging. Yeah, now weather forecast, it gives us 401. Look at this. Before, I have been able to get the weather. This is before. And right now, the very same URL here is giving me 401 because authorization is enforced for all endpoints. Even if you want to get a new service API endpoint, you won't be able until you go to the service. And actually this concludes the entire video. So now I'm not going to do these experiments. For the experiments, this walkthrough, actually I did it. This walkthrough focuses on the success path so far. Client was able to request token, client could use the token to access the API. You can now try to prove errors to learn how the system behaves. Example, try to connect to IdentityServer when it's not running, unavailable, yeah, of course. Try use the invalid client or ID secret request token. Try to ask for an invalid scope during the token request. Try to call the API when it's not running, unavailable. Don't send the token to the API. Configure the API to require a different scope than the one in the token. Of course, we're gonna get errors, so I'm not gonna continue with that. So just to wrap up and conclude all these things, so we have created 3 different projects. Identity server, here we go. API, which is a resource which wants to be protected, but to be protected by identity server, which is in fact a security token service, is going to play this role. And we have a client who is trying to access the API. So we have created an identity server using the template. After that, in the configuration file, we added whatever is necessary. Actually, it's the scope and the clients, which should ask to access the scopes, different APIs. Here is the place where we can put many different APIs. Of course, this could be a different domain right now. A second API which we wanna. After that. How can we do that? Of course, we put a comma, we say new API scope, and we give a different name. This is a second API 2. So right now we are going to protect a second domain with APIs, with our APIs if we like. This is how you do it in the list. Here we have a client. Of course, we can create again with comma here a new client, so another application could be an MVC application, for example, which requests access. Of course, we don't have the most complicated scenario with the request owner who has to see the consent page and agrees. Here is a very simple scenario. Launch settings, whatever. So after that, we created a simple API. We just created one identity controller. It could be anything. Protected. The most important is here the startup. How actually we protect ourselves. So we installed one package here, which is a JWT package, Microsoft barrier. Let me see that where it is. Here we go. Microsoft ASP.NET Core Authentication JWT barrier, which allows us to communicate with OpenID Connect and all 2.0 services, security token services. As we can see, we don't use anywhere Microsoft Identity. This is a totally different package. Okay, so it offers actually we are going to use it in Identity Server because it offers directly login, registration, social login, single sign-on, whatever. Well, not single sign-on is offered by Identity Server, but whatever. And the third one was the client. The client is using where is the client? Here we go. The client is using a library which is provided by IdentityServer4 project, identity model. which allows us actually to discover all the endpoints, discover errors, and after that communicate with Core API to request the token, first discover, request the token, and finally communicate with the protected resource, which is on the third domain. Okay, so I'm gonna stop recording now. Thank you.